Good afternoon. Harold Bachman is not back this week. Harold was in the Caribbean and he decided he was going to need a little more time to recover from his exciting adventure there. And so I'm Dr. Lightheart. I'm filling in for Harold Bachman and happy to be here with you all. I was asked to get my own guest, and so I couldn't think of anybody else first. I had to have a young man by the name of Frank Vosler. When I called Frank, he said, I've been on Thanks to Memories, but I didn't get to talk about the 20s and 30s and 40s quite enough. So, Frank, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Glad to be back.
And we're going to concentrate on the 20s, 30s, 40s. Later on, we'd be very happy to have you call in and share your memories briefly about some of the experiences in that era, those decades. But first of all, Frank, let's go back and let's start at the beginning. You were born in Ohio?
Well, yes. No, matter of fact, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. I was up there about 6 weeks. And then I should explain the circumstances. The doctor told my mother that she'd have to get away from the lakes to clear up her bronchitis. So she went back home, northwest Pennsylvania, and took us two boys. My older brother was 6 years older than myself, back to her mother's place. So I was, for 3 or 4 years, I was in Grandma's house and with my Uncle Frank. After a while, my father didn't see any other solution to the separation of the family, so he got a job in Youngstown, Ohio, with the Youngstown Sheet and Tube, where he'd worked before, and moved us all down there. So
You grew up in that area?
Yeah, that explains where I was born, I guess.
And what are some of your memories about the 20s?
Oh, in the 1920s, not my 20s. Yeah, well, I did not hear about Calvin Coolidge until after he was out of office. I guess I wasn't political enough at the age of 6. But going back to Pennsylvania, boy, my memory goes back to under 2 years of age.
Amazing.
I remember standing up in the crib, and it was maple, clear stain, and varnish. I remember the taste of the varnish that I teased on the railing on the side. And at night, that was in the upper corner of the old house, and they had overhanging eaves, and at night the wind would blow around there and through the tamarack tree. And I remember the sound of the wind, and that kind of like a lullaby. I liked that. And in the morning when they lit up, light took outside, and the world was all new. And I knew nothing about age and anything that went before. But those mourning doves, I remember the sound of the mourning doves. They sang to me. We still have mourning doves. They still sound the same. Some things never change.
That's right. Listening to you there, seemed to me a number of years ago you said that you were getting this old-timers disease, the Alzheimer's, and I don't think you'll ever get it. You keep that brain of yours so very active, and no, you indicated to me that you thought you were losing your memory, but you have an amazing memory.
Yeah, I always had a gift that way, but it is going downhill a little bit. I guess there's sections of the brain that are affected first. The section where I'm supposed to remember people's names seem to be in bad condition.
That's right.
But some sections are, I lay in bed in the morning sometimes working mathematical problems in my head. And that doesn't seem to have been affected yet, but I suppose it will.
Well, the brain, they tell us, is muscle, and we need to exercise it, so you're right on target.
Well, good. I try to keep active. I'm doing a lot of writing these days and getting some things published. So
Going back to the 1920s, tell us some of your memories of that era.
Well, I remember the automobiles. Before the law made them put bumpers on, it was optional, uh, and most of the buyers didn't pay the money to buy a bumper. Uh, but the rails, they didn't have coil springs those days. They had the semi-elliptical springs both front and back, and to accommodate them, they had the two-side mainframe car went out past the radiator sticking out in front there.
That's right.
And the front end of the elliptical spring was attached out there. So if they ran into anything, it was too bad for the thing they ran into.
That's right. Well, did you, your dad's early cars, were they cranked? Or
I don't. Oh, yeah. All cars.
Didn't use electric motor to start
them. It was about that time, I think, that Kettering invented the self-starter because women started driving cars and they complained about cranking cars, but still, most cars were cranked out front at that time. My father bought his first new car was a 1927 Chevy. I remember seeing that in the drive, and the kids in the neighborhood climbing over it.
Now, isn't that a bit unusual? My recollection of the 20s is that not too many people had cars.
Well, we were in town. I guess you were too. Were you in Columbus here?
Yes.
Yeah, I was down there. I remember a figure, and this was in the 30s, that there were 30 million cars or vehicles on the highways, which is peanuts compared to what we have today.
Right.
But then the population was 130 million also, which is about half what it is now. There were enough cars in town. Oh dear. Market Street was one block over. It's the main street through Youngstown. I remember running across Market Street, 2 lanes each way or so, and with a cardboard box over my head. I guess everybody stopped for me. A couple of nice ladies. I even remember what they looked like. I could describe the print of the dress that one lady was wearing. But they stopped and talked to me and found out where I lived and got me home. I was probably 4 or 5 at that time, 4 years so maybe.
The young people of today have no knowledge at all about cars at that time. We were talking about frequent tire punctures.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little about your encounters there.
Well, of course, I didn't worry about it when I was a kid because somebody else took care of that. But in the 40s, when I was driving, and during World War II, we sent all of our, one thing, the Japanese took over Southeast Asia with the islands down there, Malaysia, so where we'd gotten most of the rubber. We still were not getting a lot of rubber from the Amazon Valley, the area, and so they were planting rubber trees, but it was just getting underway. And so we made artificial rubber for vehicles in the car, and they didn't work quite as well. And we had to make do, bought boots, things, full-length boots curled around in the entire tire, the inside of it. And when the hole went through the tire, then we put the boot in, and when the hole went through the boot, the tire was about shot. But yeah, I did have to change and patch 2 tires on the way to church one Sunday. That was the worst.
I remember when I was in the 20s, when I was small, that my dad, it wasn't unusual for us to have 1 to 3 punctures and have to stop and repair our tire if we went out for a drive of, say, 15 miles. But that was a big trip, taking a ride of 15 miles on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever have one of those rumble seats?
My uncle had one,
Yeah.
yes, and I got to ride in it once, but not too often because I was a little kid and they didn't want me to jump out while the car
Yeah,
was in
well,
motion.
little kids and dogs might do that. My dad got a 1929 Buick 6. That was a big car with a, what, 16-inch or 18-inch wheels, genuine spoke wheels, you know, and two spares, one in each fender well up in front there, and it had a rumble seat in back. So the kids loved to ride back there.
Now, in the 20s, do you recall the electric car? There were still some around in
Yeah,
my
I
purview.
think I saw one once. Saw most of the advertisements in National Geographic. They didn't have a hood over an engine out front. They had, I guess the engine's under the floor or
Yes.
somewhere. So it was just a big, fancy-looking box. I remember the windows in them had beveled edges,
Yes.
like fancy mirrors.
And I don't believe they had a steering wheel. It was a bar that you used to turn the car, I think.
Might be, what do they call these bars?
Oh, goodness, I have no idea.
Well, they had a name for it. Yeah, that was from the old buggy or wagon days there. You know, a tiller. It was a tiller.
I see. Tiller.
Yeah.
Well, that's logical. I had a distant relative that wouldn't drive those gasoline buggies, but she had a nice, quiet electric car.
It's about safer and it didn't go as fast.
And not as far. I don't know how many miles she can go on a trip, but it wouldn't be more, what, 20 at the most?
And there were those trucks that never had flat tires, that just had solid rubber.
Oh, yes. That's right. Well, now, you went to school in Youngstown then?
Yeah, my kindergarten was in Youngstown. And there was a girl in kindergarten class that was beautiful. I thought her name was Tomato. I don't know what it was, but I called her Tomato.
Tomato.
That was my first crush. And then we had moved. The Depression was coming on, and we had moved to the vicinity of Youngstown, Ohio. We went to Beechwood and school. We walked about a mile to the school, and I walked up by a certain girl's house. And her name was Jean.
Oh, I see, not Tomato.
Not Tomato, no, that's another place. She went to the first grade, same grade I was in. And she was absent from school. She was sick. And so I would dream about going to visit her and taking crayons and coloring books to cheer her up.
Did you ever do that?
No.
Of course, I might dream about that, but that would be a
Just
big
dream
thing
about
to do. Now, did your folks, were they religious, go to church?
Yeah, I was raised in a Methodist family. All my forebears on my mother's side were, well, my father's side too, they're all Methodists. And so I was raised in Methodist church. We always had family prayers in our home. So we were good Methodists. In Youngstown, we went to a little frame church, and I remember that there was a fellow I sat in the pew behind me, and he always reached over my shoulder with a lifesaver. So that was a regular Sunday thing. And my Sunday school class down off of the vestibule, and the teacher had asked who else had a birthday, and I'd shoot my hand up. Well, it took me seriously first time, but every Sunday she asked the same question, who's had a birthday? And I put my hand up every time because I'd had a birthday.
Right. Now, when did you can recall when you were really born again? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we moved out west of Alliance a few miles, and I was going to, starting in second grade, I was going to the Marlboro schools where I continued until I graduated from high school. But we went to the Methodist church there in the little village of Marlboro, with about 300 people, I guess, in the village. And I remember the first time pastor's name was York. He was a nice man. Uh, I knew nothing about religion really in those days. The next pastor was uh, Cassidy, I believe. I'm trying to get to. I remember the names all right, but sometimes the chronology gets flipped. Um, and then the next pastor was Roe, R-O-E, and he grabbed the edge of the pulpit and rocked back and forth somehow. That was while he was speaking.
Any fire and brimstone sermons? Or?
No, he was a gentle man, and I guess the sermons. I'm sure the sermons were all good. And he had revival meetings each winter in February, and
Did you help out ever?
well, in the first year, yeah, I helped out because having gone to church all my life, I consider myself a good Christian. The second year, I was going to help out. Started the same way, but there were a couple of things that he kept preaching, and the evangelists. He'd had evangelists in for 3 weeks of nightly meetings,
Uh-huh.
and he and the evangelist would always say, you have to know when you were saved or you're not saved. You have to remember the experience or you never had one, that kind of thing. And that got to me after a while. I was out back of the house before a meeting time, playing, I guess, as usual. And I was thinking about that, and I had this strange ideas. When you don't know the Bible well, we get strange ideas. And I'd heard of 144,000. I figured, well, God would stack us all up, figuring how good we were, the best at the top. We would count down 144,000, put a divider in there, and those would go to heaven, the rest would go to hell. That was the idea I had in mind. And not realizing how many billions of people live on the face of the earth, I thought to myself, well, I've been pretty good. If he doesn't let me go to heaven, he's not fair. And then somehow, well, I'm sure it's the Holy Spirit that struck a little dart in my heart at that point. I thought that was a terrible thing to say about God, that he's not fair. I shouldn't say that. Then I got to thinking more soberly, this is foolish for me to be so stubborn on this. All I have to do is to do what the preacher says, go up to the altar and give my heart to the Lord, and then I will be sure. So I just decided I'd do that, and I did it that evening.
Did they have a call?
Oh, yes, at the end of every service, they have an altar call, yeah. So I was right.
So you did that, and was that a experience that really affected you emotionally?
Yeah, well, in terms of will, in terms of character, yes, very much so. I don't know what my emotions were. Naturally, I was thinking about the whole situation, what I was doing. But I remember the following year, they had a preacher there that emphasized sanctification. We have holiness churches that have a certain doctrine about sanctification, the second definite work of grace. And Reverend Rowe had been taught that and believed it, and the evangelist had that third year was preaching on it. So I was supposed to take that by faith. So I did the best I could. Now, there wasn't any evidence for it or promised for it at all. You just take it by faith. And so I took it by faith. And I had no way of knowing whether it happened or not, But I tried to live a perfect life. And I think I really lived a perfect life for 3 days. And the strain got too much, and I slept. So I'm not holding that doctor down. I'm not putting it down. They're wonderful people.
Right. Well, now we're jumping ahead a bit, but you really have had quite a lot of Bible training and You've had training in theology at seminary, and then you made your life's work
Something else.
engineering.
Yeah.
So you have had a very interesting life. But go ahead, you continue on at your present. You were talking about high school and your
Well, we got up to the
being born
we
again.
got up to the first grade there somewhere, didn't we? What was happening in the world? Well, you know, the Canton Repository had a contest on for kids in school to write articles on some subject, and I wrote on. We had some kind of a treaty or agreement through the League of Nations with Japan. But Japan was not allowed to build more than so many battleships, and as compared with the United States and with France and Great Britain, I guess I picked that subject at the ripe old age of 13.
Ambitious.
And they printed it. So
Is
I guess
that
I
right?
must have come out one of the first three, whatever it was.
Do you still have that?
I might, but I don't think it's worth anything.
Be interesting to read, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I wrote poetry in those days. I still have some of those copies of poetry.
Well, that was perhaps the budding of your interest in
In writing, yeah.
writing and also in what's going on in the world. You keep up on that too.
Yeah, I think especially in the 40s, I learned a lot about communism. Where that started, I was going to North Central Bible Institute, and I was in the one of the prayer. Well, they were all supposed to be in a missionary group band,
Mm-hmm.
and I chose the Eastern Europe band. And there were some there who were refugees from Eastern Europe, or from refugee families, and they knew a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot about communism and what was going on in Russia and Eastern European nations at that time.
And very few people knew much about
But
that
this
at
was
that
the
time.
end of the 30s, you know. We weren't yet in World War II at that time. And I remember in the Minneapolis Public Library, they had a propaganda film from Germany there one time. And about the of Poland and Russia, or Stalin, came in and divided Poland up between them. And I would say, looking back, the purpose of the propaganda film was to undermine our morale, to show their strength, military strength, and scare us out.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were shipping military equipment over to Great Britain at that time, and occasionally losing ships to submarines and things like that. You know.
Yeah.
So it was part of their propaganda films. I couldn't imagine 3 or 4 years later the library allowing them one of those propaganda films, but in '39 they did.
Uh-huh. What was the first college you attended?
Well, that was the North Central Bible Institute.
And then you went
And
there.
I went there a couple of years. I went to Eastern Bible Institute and graduated there with a 3-year degree. And then I went to Southern California Bible College and got a 4-year Bachelor of Arts.
Let's stop you at that point. California came in there. How did you get from Ohio to California? What brought that up?
I went trailway bus. Well,
And
why?
did you go off on your own, or did your family move?
No, my family didn't move. I just didn't feel ready to go in the ministry. Well, you know, that's kind of a psychological thing. I was telling you before the program here that I was a square peg in a round hole. I prepared for the ministry in the first place because I thought that, well, good people do that, and that was the only thing of any value, and if we didn't feel called to it, we should. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a spiritual necessity. But I hated selling. I hated public speaking, and I don't know whether I sound like it now or not, but I couldn't prepare a sermon in less than 20 hours. But any rate,
Well, it takes about 20 hours for a good sermon, doesn't it?
well, I guess a good sermon depends upon the time of the person. But you know, a pastor normally has to speak at least 3 times a week, sometimes more. And if he kind of spends 20 hours on each one, he's
That's true.
he's cooked before he starts. So, at any rate, it was easier to go to school. I'd always done well in school, and so I went back to something I could do well at instead of.
Now, you mentioned California. Tell us more about your experience in seminaries and so forth in California.
Well, I got a BA and a THB at the Southern California Bible College. THB was a graduate degree in theology. And while I was, on another trip out there, I was teaching in a Bible school and at the same time attending Fuller Theological Seminary, taking church history there. Before that, though, right after Southern California Bible College, I went to Phillips University and spent 1 year getting a degree in history from them and 1 year in their seminary, which they had attached to the school. That was Church of Christ Seminary. So that's pretty much my formal schooling. But after it seemed to be unable to satisfy people with my preaching and was getting washed out of the ministry, hadn't gotten married, didn't have money, was sponging off my parents and so on, I decided to throw in the towel and make my living at what I really loved doing, which is science, technology, engineering, whatever. I didn't have the formal schooling for that, but I started out drafting and picked up classes as I could wherever I happened to be working. I would attend, and I got pretty well through calculus and chemistry and physics and so on.
And did you take some courses in the universities in engineering?
Yeah. So UCLA took stress analysis and electronics and calculus there.
And most of your working life you spent as an engineer designing airplanes.
Yeah, airplanes, missiles, helicopters, the whole works. Anything that will get up above the earth.
So there's a hobby when you want to get into. I guess it's a hobby a little later. Creationism has become quite important with the current debate.
I started to tell you about my learning about communism and going on.
Okay.
Going on from there, I listened to all the so-called experts coming through and read all the books. I read scads of books, including books written by communists. And I even subscribed to a couple of communist publications for a while. It was like, that was amazing. It was like sitting on the front row of world affairs.
That's right.
Because I would read about things a month before they happened. By
reading the communist literature, that's exactly right.
Right. I would see the headlines of the paper and read about it. I said, I knew that a month ago it was written up in the communist papers. Right. They have a kind of an Aesopian way of talking to each other, kind of obliquely and erudite language and academically and so on. And they're not planning on overthrowing the country. They're just discussing the kind of government should be and how it should, they discuss all these things academically.
Did you subscribe to Political Affairs by any means? That was one of them.
That was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, that was for the eggheads, the people that could understand it. That was for the real indoctrinated communist or someone.
And I got, what was it called? World Marxist Review, I think it was.
Right.
And sometimes I would pick up the Daily Worker, which would be on the newsstand. Read that.
Or on the West Coast, there was another one.
People's
World, yes. Right. Yeah. So you could get the lowdown. I know a friend of mine in the 30s read he was in the agriculture department in Washington. He read about the Communist Plan for Agriculture. And 1 month later, the Secretary of Agriculture, Brannon, came out with a Brannon Plan, and my friend looked, and it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you could tell who the communists were.
That's right.
Well, that was scary because there were people in high places in Washington.
I think we have another half hour. We're going to explore some of these things in great detail, but we're going to have a break, and we're going to go back somewhere in the 40s, and our good engineer is going to entertain us. What wonderful memories that song brings back. I remember my days in the 30s when I was part of a small orchestra, and I don't know if it was 30s or 40s, but I remember that one. Wonderful memories. We are substituting this afternoon for Harold Bachman. I'm Dr. Lightheart, and my guest is Frank Vosler, who has a wonderful memory of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and he was a very busy fellow all of his life. You have related about your education in Bible college and seminary, and then we were up to the point where you did partly self-study, but college courses, and you became a design engineer for the
aerospace industry.
Aerospace industry, right. And along that line, way back, we were talking about that nice little girl that you saw, and then another little girl that you were going to color for, but we didn't come up to that special young lady. About when did you meet your wife? And
Well, excuse me. When I was going to Southern California Bible College, I attended the Big Bethel Temple Church. This is a large Assembly of God church in Los Angeles, and there were a lot of girls in the church there. I looked them over, and this one was one of them, and I dated her, and she suited me, but I didn't make up my mind right away. So I went back east, and it was a few years later, another trip out there. Meanwhile, she'd gone to college, gotten a degree, and she'd been on a debate team and public speaking, won some college honors, and I guess she was getting ready. She's taught in a Christian school afterwards, after I married her. So I think she had the degree for that. But at any rate, I was out in the West Coast again, and I proposed to her, and she said yes. I don't know why, but at any rate, that's pretty well settled that question for me, and she's been a very nice wife.
And did you live on the West Coast for a long time, or did you?
Yeah, that was 57. We were married, and she was about 29. I was about 34, something like that. And I think the next time we came back east was in 60, into 65. So
you worked in the aerospace industry in the West Coast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when I came back east, I went down to Georgia, and I worked at Lockheed, Georgia, on the C-5A, and later on the L-1011 down there. All the big aircraft I worked on, Boeing, 737, and the Douglas DC-10, and I worked on a lot of small planes. The Tomcat, that was the F-14 for Grumman, and there are a lot of Navy trainers, planes that land on ships. They're interesting because they land so hard that their gear, landing gear has to be about twice as strong as anybody else's, really, and long, collapse a long distance, and very humongous loads.
Right,
So
I hadn't
the
thought about
big landing gears.
right. Then you worked at Rockwell for.
No, I never worked at Rockwell.
Oh, really?
Everybody puts me there because it's Columbus.
Uh-huh.
I worked at North American out in the West Coast.
Oh.
Well, that was the XB-70.
Uh-huh.
XB, I think, X-70 anyway, the big Valkyrie bomber.
Oh.
And I worked on some of the cockpit instrumentation there. And also at North American, I worked at some of the instrumentation. They computer. They have small computers that put an awful lot in computers. It's been miniaturized since then, but those computer boxes were roomfuls, they're big. I worked on them and printed circuit boards and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, all through the years, you've had a tremendous love for the Lord, and you taught Bible class. You've actually taught Christian school in recent years. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, tell me, with this big debate going on with the Board of Education today between intelligent design and evolution.
Yeah.
Let's go back and where did your interest in creationism arise?
Okay, I think that my interest, I've always been interested in creation science. There used to be Harry Rimmer books and Dr. Wilson and Brown, I think it was H.R. Brown or something like that. But there were a few individuals scattered here and there. But in 1961, I think it is, that Dr. Henry Morris, hydrologist, which is a kind of specialty of geology, wrote a book on the Genesis flood.
Right.
And that's a classic now. And that was the beginning of the present day creation science movement.
Right.
When I was out in California, somebody, I saw in the paper, somebody told me about a creation science seminar. And that was going to be my first chance to see one, be there. So I went. It was in I would say now, it was in a church. I'm guessing it was a Lutheran church. And you remember Walter Lang? He was there.
Oh.
And his
Bible Science Association.
And his newsletter. And of course, Henry Morris was there. And those, I'm afraid, are probably the only two names I'm going to come up with. There were other speakers, but I don't remember who they were.
Was that in Orange County, close to Disney World?
Probably was.
I think we were at the same convention.
Well,
we might have been.
We might have been.
Amazing.
And one fellow there I did recognize. He was not a scientist. His name was. He was an undercover agent of the FBI up in San Francisco, I think, somewhere, and he testified. Well, that section of my brain where the names are kept, it got bombed. No, I don't remember, but there was a book. He wrote a book about his experiences. Anyway, he was there. So, Carl, that's his first name. All right.
It'll come to us.
Yeah.
I can't remember it either. But, well, that is amazing that we attended that same convention. And there were some good speakers. Was Dr. Morris co-wrote Genesis Flood?
With John, well, this was over at Grace Theological Seminary.
Yes, I think he was at that convention and spoke. Am I not right?
he may very well have been, but I don't recall him at that place. I've heard him since then.
Right.
Not Whitmore.
Whitcomb.
Whitcomb. Yeah.
Right.
No, John Whitcomb.
Yeah. Dr. Whitcomb. Now, you have written extensively and spoken extensively about creationism, and I remember several years ago we had a program, Everybody's Talking, where you said that you felt that the intelligent design was the coming thing, and that was before I knew about the black box and some of the books.
Yeah, I need to. Most of our listeners probably are Christian people and need to be educated on the whole scene here. But we have a division between the old Earth creationists and young Earth creationists. Now, the old Earth creationists are mostly associated with the ASA. Science Association, American Science Association. I belonged to that for 1 year. And I won't talk about the disagreements between the two groups. Aren't always real pleasant. But those two groups never did get together. Dr. Morris, Henry Morris, of course, a younger creationist, and he went up to Wheaton College, and it was for a seminar. Is that what they called when just the faculty get together? I guess you don't call it a seminar, but to meet with them in an extended discussion. Came away without apparently having accomplished anything, having won them over. So we have the two groups today, and most of the efforts in the past have been by the old Earth creationists, and most of the state laws they've tried to get passed always had a little something related to chronology, something about Noah's flood or the dating of the rocks and things like that. And of course, with the politics the way it is, we've gotten beaten back each time because the judges never. They don't know anything about science. They don't pretend to. They just count notes as they do their science democratically. And the evolutionists bring 20 scientists there to testify, and the creationists bring 2 who later get fired from wherever they're working. And the reason the creationists can't bring many is not because there aren't many. There's plenty, probably a couple thousand. But because as soon as they're discovered, come out of the closet, the evolutionists have the nasty habit of finding out where they work. They probably already know, and seeing that they get dislodged. And so they have families to feed, so they have to protect themselves. And so they are reluctant to come out and testify at the court cases. And if the judges count noses, the evolutionists win.
Let's talk about, for just a few minutes, about is the debate very important? Is this some side issue in Christianity, creationism, or is it central?
No, I think it's the most important thing that we're into. And I think most of the preachers don't understand that yet today. Preachers habitually look upon these science arguments as a part of what they would call Christian evidences. In other words, the sole purpose and benefit of this is to prove the Bible's right.
Mm-hmm.
When they go into the public arena, they take that mindset with them.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the opposition detects the Bible connected with it there, they come back with these fundamentalists are trying to sneak the Bible into and this is really religion under disguise.
Yes,
and so far, they've always been able to win with that argument.
They always bring in that we're the flat Earth people.
Yeah,
we still believe the Earth is flat. We don't know anything about science.
Nobody's ever believed that, but you know,
derision.
Derision. You know, they lie a lot. They're going to call in and say, Name one. Prove it. Yeah, every time we see an article by them in the newspaper, we say, we see this sentence, it's like boilerplate. Uh, Intelligent design or creation science is the belief in the Genesis story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a lie. That they can know, they probably do know. We have so many books, so much literature. They know that's not what it is.
Well, and the argument is that the evolutionists are scientists, and anybody that believes in creationism and the young Earth doesn't know any science at all.
You know, when they write an article on the subject, they typically they will refer to their own experts as Dr. So-and-so, who is a research scientist or who is a professor of biology or something at such and such an institution. And then when they refer to the creationists, they won't even use the term doctor, and they won't give anything about their education, and they'll let it appear that they are just fundamentalist farmers or whatever who know nothing of science. And that's the gist of their articles. You know.
Now, what influence on theology and on Christian belief and on churches has Darwin's theory had?
There's two ways, twofold answer to that question. In the first place, evolution does not derive from the scientific evidence. It derives from the atheistic philosophy. If there is no God, that's the unspoken premise in all the arguments. They don't say that, but it's a necessary premise, otherwise the rest of the logic doesn't hold. But if there is no God, then they acknowledge that there is design. This is the second premise, there is design. We all agree to that. There is design, but there's no God to produce the design. Therefore, design produced itself, or nature produced it. So this is the beginning of their logic. Now, how did nature produce it? Well, they come up with all kinds of stories, something like Kipling's Just So stories. How did the bear lose its tail? How did the leopard get its spots? Things like that. And how did the dinosaur turn into a bird? And how did the molecule turn into a man? So they make up all these stories and have no evidence for the stories. They said, well, I thought fossils were evidence. Well, not really. What fossils? Look at them. I mean, you have thousands of fossils of one species, thousands of fossils of another species, thousands of fossils of another species. Really not different from the world today. And we can classify things. If evolution is true and they all started from one first lucky cell, they'd have that cell somewhere along the line have to become vertebrates and have to become invertebrates and have to become plants and have to become everything, you know, and you'd have all these intermediate crossovers.
Transition forms.
And they'd be in the fossil records, should be, but they're not.
Now, in our churches today, the churches fall into sort of liberal, which interprets the Bible rather liberally. They don't. Not everything in the Bible is God's word, and the conservatives, where every word in the Bible is as God wanted it, and the Bible is the verbally inspired word of God. Now, evolution has had a big role in bringing about the liberal churches and liberal thought, has not?
Yes, the apostasy, the whole, what we call apostasy, started moving rapidly about Darwin's time. Actually, Milton David Heiser has a book. It was published in 1959, somewhere around there. And he's a zoologist, a very brilliant man. He could trace the history of the effect, the impact of Darwinism in the churches through all those years. And I think any preacher, every pastor should get that book. I think it's called Evolution and the Christian Faith. And I
Is he
don't
still
know.
alive? He was a wonderful man.
Yeah, I think he is still
Now,
alive.
he was at that convention. And, yes.
He
was.
might have been. I don't remember. I didn't know him at that time.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of people there, and they may have been great people, but I wouldn't have recognized them.
Yes, he spoke, and I
Okay.
spent some time with him.
Yeah.
Now, the society has been greatly influenced by evolution too. You were talking about communism, and you're bumping into it back in the 40s, long before I knew anything about it. But communism is based on evolution.
It's based on atheism. Karl Marx was a nominal Christian when he went to high school, but he lost his faith in Berlin University. And it was the time of the what we call German rationalism and higher criticism. We had people like Strauss, who wrote The Life of Jesus, Leben Jesu, to demythologize all the Christian faith and undeify, or whatever the word would be, Jesus Christ. He was an ordinary man if he lived, and they came out with the Graf Wellhausen theory about the writing of the books of Moses and things like that. So that was all taking place about the time, the late 1800s. And that, as well as Darwin's book, caused the sliding away of the faith of the American church very heavily in those days, and England too.
Yes, and so gradually the seminaries in America were taken over
Seminaries,
by
right.
liberal mentality, and got away from hard criticism was the order of the day of the seminaries.
Now, one of the things that happened from the standpoint of strategy is that the people who opposed faith in God, people who were against the church, went for degrees. The socialists went for degrees, and the atheists went for degrees, and the agnostics, word that Thomas Huxley coined, they went for degrees. All these people that are not very Christian or ruining everybody's faith, they went for these degrees. And with the degrees, they got on faculties. And with the faculties, they made converts of the brightest young people growing up. And this is the way they took over.
Yes, and Frank, we have looked at some of these things that are happening in our world, and some rather weighty subjects, and I think we've maybe missed out on some of the memories that you have in the early days. We have about 4 minutes left. Were there any special things that you'd like to dwell on in these last minutes about fond memories, or?
Well, we covered a lot of it there. There's a lot of trivia memory, of course. Oh, you might say we've made an improvement in Halloween. And I shouldn't give children listening in any ideas, but we used to mess things up pretty bad. I'm glad we've gotten away from that.
It's not a trick anymore. It's mostly treat. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they go around to the houses for. I guess they say trick or treat, but I never found out what the trick would be. We didn't treat them. Anyway, we give them a piece of candy. That's okay. That's fine.
Now, are you still pretty active in your church?
Oh yeah, active as I can be.
Do you teach?
Well, I'm in charge of a old folks Sunday school class. I don't teach there every Sunday. We have about 8 to rotate. We take turns teaching each other.
Yes, not too long ago you taught a course on Islam. Is that not right?
Not in the church there. Um, Now, I'll tell you, there's a Christian newspaper it's published out here in Dayton called the Christian Citizens. If you go into almost any Columbus library, branch library, you may find a little stack of them where the free papers are. The Christian Citizen and newspaper, that's what it's called, Christian Citizen newspaper. Uh, I've been writing for that quite regularly, and I wrote some articles on Islam in the past issues of that. In the current issue, they didn't get my column in, but in the coming issue, I think I'll be in there a couple times. So that's one of my outlets, and then I write letters to the editors, and several of them have been published lately. So that's another outlet.
In the last minute, there's somebody out there listening who is kind of lost. What do they need to do?
Well, first of all, the whole reason why we're here in this world is to make a right decision about the God who created us. He created us for a purpose, that he might enjoy our fellowship for eternity. And but that has to start off on the right footing, because he is a righteous God, and that's what your conscience is all about. And everybody knows in their conscience they haven't been righteous, so they got to do something about that. And the Bible tells us what to do about it. God is a forgiving God, and if you repent of your sins and come to him and ask his forgiveness, he'll do that, and he starts you in a new life with the Holy Spirit. And that's called regeneration or born again. And from then on, you walk with the Lord Jesus Christ, and he is the only way to heaven, the only salvation. And I think I was talking with you about Muslim religion. You asked about getting saved that way. Yeah, and we were up to the same question here. Yes, Jesus is the only name under heaven given to men whereby we must be saved.
That is wonderful. I think that's a delightful conclusion to a wonderful hour, and we certainly have enjoyed it. Frank, the Lord's blessing to you and your wife.
Thank you.
And to your family.
Dr. Lightheart.
And to all of you listeners. Good afternoon.